Hey guys, listen, I want to give a little information about something. My name is Rick Krause. I want to talk about the neglect of a case concerning my son. On November the 11th, 2011, my son was so-called in a car accident, so they say, but he was beat to death, and the case has been neglected. And I'll tell you kind of what went on. We got knock on our door at quarter after at 5:16 on November the 11th a.m. Said our son was in a serious car accident. We'd better go to the hospital. So we did. And when we got there, our son was laying there pretty lifeless. And my wife went through his pockets and she found a cell phone. And on the cell phone was a message. It says, "I'm sorry, I don't blame you for the accident. I hope you're not hurt." From a certain individual. And anyway, so our son was rushed to the QE2. And he stayed there for a week where he'd fought and suffered for his life and passed away on the 18th of November. Well, I want to talk to you about the neglect of the RCMP. The RCMP, the constable that handled it, the leading investigator was Don Fisher. He's not no longer a part of the detachment here in New Minas, but he is still an RCMP. And at one point in time, I was approached by this individual, and he said, "If your son doesn't stop hanging around with my daughter, I'm going to rip his effing head off." And I said, "Well, I probably wouldn't advise that if I were you." So a week later, my son was in the hospital fighting for his life. So prior to that, in October, this individual tried to chase my son and another individual down the mountain, down Gaspel Mountain, which is outside of Wolfville, down the mountain, and tried to chase him off the road. The driver that tried to chase him off the road had called the father, which wasn't me, of one of the other children, and said, "Look, I'm sorry for what I've done. You know, I didn't realize what I was doing." So that was fine. Well, a week before that, the individual that tried to chase my son off the mountain, or tried to chase the two boys off the mountain, sorry, his wife had pulled into our yard like a NASCAR driver, and there was kids playing in the yard and stuff and whatnot, and she proceeded to shoot them both off. Apparently she was chasing my son. And my son's name is Michael Krause, by the way, sorry. And she thought she was going to just come in the house like she owned the place. Well, my wife went out and said, "Listen, if you get a problem, we're going to deal with it." And she said, "Well, you know, should I get mostly with my wife?" And my wife just said, "Listen, you know, you best leave. If not, then, you know, you're going to have to take what's going to come to you." So, anyway, before that incident, my son was held at gunpoint, in which we had witnesses for. And my son just kind of like, you know, "Hey, bring it on," which nothing became of it. So this all was allowed to happen. This individual got away with these incidents. This was all brought to the RCMP's attention on November the 21st, 3 days after we came home from the hospital. We had contacted Constable Don Fisher, or tried to contact him, sorry. And when we did, we had to make an appointment, more or less, for him to come to our house, which is at 5:30 a.m. And we give him a 7-page statement. And we give him probably 15 names of people that were here when these incidents took place. And same with the fellow that he approached me in my job and threatened my son's life there. And we had brought this to all their attention. And he said, "Okay, well, not a problem." Well, this is 3 days after our son had passed away. The officer had stood up, which is Don Fisher, and said, "We have no right to be upset." I said to Don Fisher, "You can leave my home, or I can gladly help you." Now, I'm not saying this to be a bad person. I'm not putting this online to be a bad person, nothing but. People have to know what people are dealing with when it comes to our RCMP. Don Fisher allowed this to happen. He did not even come to the hospital to see how our son was doing. Our son had stones embedded in his wrists and in his chin. He had one stone in his chin, and he had probably a 9.5-inch gash across the top of his head, which was done with a blunt object repetitively. The nurse that was taking care of our son told us this, and Don Fisher, you would have known this if you had showed up at the hospital, like you were supposed to have. We never received a phone call about this accident. They never come to tell us about the phone call or the accident until 5:16, like I said, a.m. in the morning. The accident was supposed to have taken place at 3:30. The ambulance wasn't called until 4:44. The accident was only a 17-minute drive from our home, if that. Now, you tell me what happened within that hour and 14 minutes. I'm going to tell you what happened in that hour and 14 minutes. That gives this individual time to drag my son on his belly through the dirt, beat him with probably a ball bat, I would say, I guess I would presume, some kind of a weapon, and put him back in the car, and then they called the cops, and then the young fellow, he went to this house, made this scene and whatnot, while this was going on, mind you. And so that's when we got the knock on doors of 5:16. So this tells me that you're allowed to do this to people and have no consequences whatsoever, which, in my view, is wrong, I do believe. I'm pretty sure it's wrong. So I spoke to probably 50, 60 cops over the last 5 years, 5.5 years. And a lot of them don't want nothing to do with it. But a lot of them just shake their heads and say, wow, I don't believe that. It's like, yeah, and this Constable Don Fisher makes you cops look bad. And I'm not trying to slander you RCMP or anything, but I thought there was a law against organized crime. And if there is, then Mr. Fisher should be held accountable for neglect of this case. And you guys also have these papers that they're complaint forms. Well, they're only good for 1 year. I only have 1 year to file a complaint against Don Fisher. I didn't know that because I wasn't told that. But I do have the right to freedom of speech, which I'm exercising right now. And the reason why the cops don't really want anything to do with it is I'm going to tell you why. I believe it's the same thing CTV News told me. They told me that it was a complicated case. Too complicated. That's why they wanted nothing to do with it. So, therefore, after 5.5 years now, we have no closure, and nobody's been held responsible. And I was always in the understanding that you can't take the law in your own hand. Well, in this particular case, there was no justice because there was no law. Is that not right, Don Fisher? Now remember, we were told we had no right to be upset, and that the deceased has to be the one to lay the charges. We were told that by Craig Booth. He was supposed to be a private investigator for this case. His investigation was to make Don Fisher look good, is what he did. So you cops, you hide evidence, and you lie for each other to make each other look good. It's been proven many, many times. I will stand in front of a judge and just state everything I just said. But Don Fisher, you are a poor excuse for our RCMP. You're the one that tarnishes the badge. Where were you when that Justin Burke shooting went? You were hiding behind a car. It's a different story when your life's at stake, isn't it, Don? You're not the one that stands there every morning and says, why didn't this happen? Why wasn't this done? Why wasn't this done? How come I have to stand here and wonder why? When I've called you, Don, and you refuse my calls, you refuse to talk to me or my wife, you make excuses up. And, the real bad thing about it is, Don, you're the reason why people do what they do sometimes. I'm not saying I would do that, because no cop is worth anything like that, whatever it may be. But I will say this. If you speak to an officer, you make sure of 3 things. That is, 1, you have a witness with you. 2, if you don't have a witness, have a phone. 3 is carry a shovel, because a lot of them just like to fill you full of bullshit. And it's wrong. You go online and you will see this app, and it will say RCMP. 90% of their complaints, they don't even look at them. They just refuse them, plain and simple, up straight. Sorry, we ain't looking at you. Same thing with their complaint forms that they have. You have 1 year, like I said. And like I said, I spoke to a lot of cops, and a lot of them just can't believe we still have no closure, or no one's been held accountable. And out of all these things that I've stated on here, we have had proof. We have proof in writing about where this young fella went to this individual's door, knocked on it at 3:30, went into hysterics to allow him time, to drown out the noise, of him time to beat my son to death. That's not right. And I'm trying to take what's wrong and make it right. And you, Don Fisher, or any of you RCMPs, do not want to do that. So if he continues, if he continues to shoot his mouth off and run his mouth off at me the way he does, I'm going to have to respond, and I don't want to do that because he's not worth jail time. Now, this could have all been avoided if Don Fisher had responsibly filled his position as an RCMP officer. And I thought there was a law against organized crime. If there's not, well, that's probably why people do what they do. But if there is, then, you know, come on. So remember, Don, every November the 11th, I wonder why you didn't do your job. You weren't the one that's sitting down there and watch your son fight for his life. You're not the one that stands on that doorstep every morning, Don, and wonders why this didn't take place or that didn't take place. But you know, I don't have to wonder, because you know why? Because I know. And you know why I know, Don? Because I know how you cops work. And it's a real shame because a lot of you cops, like yourself, make a lot of them look bad, which is not fair to them. So just remember, Don Fisher, every Remembrance Day, I have to get up knowing that my son, Michael, will not be with us for New Year's dinner, or for November's dinner. All because of some stupid thing. And you allowed them, him, them, whoever, I know who they are, and so do you, Don, to get away with what they got away with. That's something to be proud of, isn't it? Anyway, keep your stick on the ice, Donnie, and your coffee cup in your hand. We'll see you later on down the road, buddy.